How's it going? In this video, I'm going to be doing a review of the book The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. The Four Agreements is best for those who are looking for a little bit of a lighter, faster read, who don't mind a heavy dose of spirituality, even though it's not tied directly to any religion, and those who want kind of some general ideas as opposed to really concrete action steps. Difficulty to digest. So there is quite a bit of figurative language in the Four Agreements, so it can get kind of difficult to understand. However, the four core concepts, the agreements themselves, are really clear, so you should be able to get that out of the initial read through without much effort, but really delving into some of the nuances might take a little bit more time to just understand exactly what's being said. Key insights. So, the four agreements, again, pretty easy to understand the general concepts, but there is a lot of interesting language and different ways of looking at things that can make it a little bit hard to parse. Luckily, those core concepts shine through really easily and they make a lot of sense. The book kind of starts with the idea that we basically are molded and live within the confines of the ideas that we choose to internalize or the agreements that we have in existing with ourselves and with others and with the world. So you can think of it, like as kids grow up, they get more of these rules and agreements from external sources that kind of push back against their internal forces and shape them into the kind of person that they become. Now, the idea here is these agreements, these ideas that we internalize, heavily dictate our actions, feelings, all of the types of things that we do, because it's our basis for how we understand and interact with anything in the world, including ourselves. After that, the book moves into the four agreements, which is the core, thrust of the book, and those are really easy to understand. Here they are. We'll go through each one and kind of some ideas. The first is to be impeccable with your word. Essentially what that means is words are important, and we should say things that we mean to say or mean to do and follow through on that, because if we don't, a couple things can happen. If we're too loose with the way that we speak, we can end up hurting others. If we don't stick to our commitments and the things that we say, we run the risk of losing the faith of others and faith in ourselves. And I don't mean faith in any kind of a spiritual context, but in the context of just believing that we will stick to the things that we say we're going to do. The last piece there is Ruiz advocates for making sure to use your words to communicate love and kindness and connection. The next agreement is to not take anything personally, and the idea here is basically that we cannot control the actions of anyone else. So what we see other people do, we didn't have any direct influence over, and in addition to that, everyone is looking through the world in their own lens. So what you see and interpret and think may not match the way that they're seeing and interpreting and thinking about the world. And these mismatches can kind of cause some assumptions to come up that make you think things are personal when they are not. So doing your best to understand the whole context of behavior and seeing that your actions do not make other people act in particular ways. When we can separate our value from other people's actions, we gain a lot more stability in our emotional state and our ability to see things more clearly. The third agreement is don't make assumptions, and this one's pretty straightforward, but essentially the idea here is that we need to be open to communicating and asking questions and seeing what it is that other people feel and think and whatnot. And by making sure that we ask these questions without making assumptions, we avoid a lot of the interactions where we cause pain or feel pain because things have just been assumed to be a certain way when they're really not. And the fourth agreement is always do your best. Here, again, pretty straightforward, but it's if you know that you have done your best in every scenario and every situation, then you can rest easy, right? There's not really anything to regret. And the one extra piece that comes with that is understanding what your best is in the context in which it happens. So, if you're feeling sick or if you have a bad day, those are going to be different doing your best than going and waking up and feeling refreshed and nice and really knocking out a bunch of stuff. But the core idea here is to just always know that you've done your best so that you have nothing to regret moving forward. So, overall opinion, the Four Agreements has some really nice ideas. You're going to get, those four key concepts out of it really easily. Beyond that, however, a lot of the other nuance is really dug into a lot of figurative language or language that can take some time to decipher. So it's probably not going to be the most straightforward path, but there is definitely benefit here if you're willing to kind of go through that work. Other considerations. So, one of the things that stood out to me is there's a lot of focus on not feeling good enough. And while I have no doubt that this is something that bothers a lot of people, right? It's definitely something I've dealt with. The way it's phrased is that this is the default human condition. And I just don't think that's necessarily true, right? It's not necessarily the default that we're going to feel like we're not good enough. That being said, for a lot of people, it's going to be a useful frame and have things that are useful. I just wanted to point out that it's not really the default. Another point that I wanted to pick out that really stood out to me that I did not like much was it says something along the lines of happiness is a choice and so is suffering. And those kinds of phrases drive me crazy because it really trivializes the entire process, right? It makes some people feel like or think that if they just make this one single choice, they can be happy all the time and never suffer and never have negative emotions. When in reality, happiness is about building up a set of processes and habits and things to optimize your happiness, but still understanding and accepting that negative emotions, negative things, suffering, and in this context, suffering is probably adding on to misery more than you need to, but suffering at a baseline is going to exist. Those things are part of the human experience, and it's not just a single choice that can wipe these things away. So I really wanted to hone in on that because it's something I hear quite a bit and something I really disagree with. It's not about finding perfection. It's not about I make this choice and everything is good from then on. It's about the process of improving over time, not perfection. My last hiccup that I had is that this book is titled as a practical guide, and I just don't really think that's the case. There's no real steps, there's no real exercises built into this book. There's some really nice concepts that are packaged in a way that's interesting, but as far as being practical, it's really hard to actually implement these things, right? For example, it says, just be love. What does that mean? How do you take action on that? What are the steps, right? The concept is kind of nice, but without actual action steps, I have a hard time seeing how this is a practical guide. All right, on to some reflection questions. 1. How well do you stick to your words and commitments? 2. How often do you take others' actions personally? 3. What is one assumption you've made recently? What questions might you have asked instead? 4. Think about a recent event or project. Did you genuinely do your best? How can you push yourself to do your best next time? So, all in all, the Four Agreements is a really short read. There are some nice things built in there. It can be a little bit hard to dig out things beyond the actual Four Agreements because they're a little bit clouded. I have a couple other, nuanced things that didn't sit well with me, but for the most part, it's a pretty decent book and one you can get through fast. So if that seems to fit what you're looking for, then go ahead and pick it up. That's all I've got for this video. As always, if you have any questions, comments, topics you want me to cover, put them down in the box below. I'll get to them as soon as I can, and I will see you next time.
You can check out more content at howtohappy.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe so you can stay up to date on the videos. We've also got a Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook that you can check out. Reflect, take action, and enjoy life. See you next time.